My mom let her new husband kick me out on my 18th birthday. But the house they stole was secretly mine all along. Now I'm taking it back. My name is Kevin, and I am 19 years old. I am now studying computer engineering at a state college in Arizona. I never expected to share my life story here, but after everything that has happened in the last several months, I decided someone could benefit from my experience. Warning: this is going to be a long one. I grew up in what I'd call a middle-class neighborhood in Phoenix, one of those cookie-cutter subdivisions where all of the houses look similar but have enough variances to prevent you from accidentally walking into your neighbor's home. Our house had 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, a decent backyard, and a garage that my father transformed into a workshop. Nothing extravagant, but it was home. Speaking of my father, he was the best person I knew. He worked as an electrical engineer at a local aerospace business, coached my little baseball team, and showed me how to build my first computer when I was 8. He was not flawless. Dude couldn't cook to save his life and had an odd love with 80s metal bands, but he was always there for me until he wasn't. My father died of a huge heart attack when I was 10. He was only 38 years old, had no warning indications, no family history, and was suddenly gone. One day, we were playing catch in the backyard. The next day, Mom tells me he'll never come home. That kind of alters you, especially as a child. After Dad died, it was just me and my mother, Sandra, for about 2 years. She was fine, I suppose. She worked as an office manager at a dental business and earned approximately $55,000 per year. We were not wealthy, but Dad's life insurance and job benefits kept us comfortable. Mom was not particularly warm or friendly before Dad died, but she became colder thereafter, as if she regretted having to raise me alone. Then Rick joined the picture. Mom met him at a networking event for local businesses. He claimed to be an entrepreneur with several businesses and investment prospects. Red flags are everywhere, right? But Mom was unable or unwilling to see it. They dated for a whole 6 months before marrying. I was 13 at the time, awkward as hell, and not delighted with this random person suddenly being my new father. Rick came into our house with his 15-year-old daughter Tessa, who was 2 years older than me. She was a complete disaster from the start, taking my belongings, eating my meals, making messes all over the place, and blaming me. Using my computer without authorization and downloading viruses. And of course, Mom and Rick always supported her. Kevin, don't be so sensitive. Kevin, you need to share with your sister. Kevin, stop exaggerating. Kevin, you need to be more understanding. It felt like someone had said it before. Meanwhile, Tessa smirked at me behind their backs, confident that she could get away with anything. Rick was worse in multiple ways. He drove a leased BMW, which he could barely afford. I later discovered that he was always late on payments, wore false designer clothes, and enjoyed bragging about his connections and transactions that never materialized. He'd return home with fancy devices or watches, flaunt them for a few weeks, and then inexplicably vanish when he couldn't make his credit card payments. In addition, he was incredibly lazy. Mom would go for work at 7:30 in the morning, while Rick would sleep until noon. He claimed to work from home, but much of his time was spent watching ESPN and making the rare business call, which was usually him trying to recruit another poor sucker into one of his pyramid schemes. By the time I was 14, I realized no one in the house was watching out for me. So I began looking out for myself. When I turned 15, I studied hard, kept my head down, and started working part-time at a local computer repair company. Mr. Singh, the owner, was a kind guy who taught me some essential skills. I began off at $10 an hour just cleaning the shop and doing basic inventory, but as I learned more, I was promoted to $12, then $15 an hour for genuine repair work. I saved nearly everything I earned. I had an old ammo box that used to be my grandfather's, and I kept my money hidden in the crawl space above my closet where Tessa couldn't find it. By the time I graduated from high school, I had saved over $8,000. It was not a fortune, but it was money I had earned. I also had a close group of buddies named Adam, Noah, and Luke. We were the kind of nerdy men that built gaming PCs and spent weekends playing D&D instead of going to parties. Adam's living arrangement was really good. His parents were both teachers, and really mellow. Noah lived with his mother, who worked nights as a nurse, thus his home was frequently empty. Luke had the strictest parents, but they still respected him. All 3 of them knew my home life was bad, but I tried not to whine too much. Fast forward to my 18th birthday on October 22nd last year. It was a Thursday, so I had my programming fundamentals class at the community college in the morning. My senior year, I took dual enrollment, traditional high school classes, and worked at a computer shop. There is nothing extraordinary planned. My friends had proposed getting pizza that weekend to celebrate, but on the actual day, I simply wanted to go home and relax. I received a few "Happy Day Bro" texts throughout the day, a candy bar from Mr. Singh, and, oddly enough, an actual birthday card from Mrs. Alvarez, our 70-something neighbor who had been next door since before I was born. She'd always been kind to me, especially after Dad died. I did not have a car when I got off the bus that evening at 6:30 p.m. Rick had persuaded Mom that getting me a car would spoil me. I was actually in a good mood. Perhaps there would be a store-bought cake or something at home. Maybe Mom remembers. As I came closer, our house, I noticed Rick standing on the driveway next to his prized BMW. He was holding my old blue duffel bag, which my father and I used to carry on camping trips, and he had the most punchable smirk. No hello, and no happy birthday. He merely tossed my luggage on the concrete driveway and said, "Time's up, kid. You're 18, which means you're no longer my problem. Get the hell out of my house." I stood there absolutely stunned, as if my brain couldn't grasp what was happening. "What are you talking about?" I finally asked. Rick laughed. "You're an adult now, adults don't live rent-free. Your mom and I decided it's time for you to move out and experience the real world." "But this is my mom's house. Where am I supposed to go?" I muttered, still not understanding what was going on. Rick's laugh became louder and meaner. "Your mom's house? That's cute. Ask her yourself if you don't believe me." Then I heard Tessa shouting from her bedroom window. "Mom already knows. She's totally fine with it. You're out, loser." She was filming the entire episode on her phone, most likely for her idiotic TikTok, where she pretended her life was so hard. I could not believe what was happening. My legs felt weak, and I experienced a strange buzzing in my ears. With shaky hands, I took out my phone and contacted my mother. She was still at work. The dentist office remained open late on Thursdays. She responded after 5 rings. "Mom," I whispered, attempting to keep my voice steady. "Rick just kicked me out. He threw my stuff on the driveway." There was a pause. Then she simply stated, "I know, Kevin. We discussed this. You're an adult now." My heart felt like it had stopped. "You agreed to this? To throw me out on my birthday with no warning?" She sighed, as if I was overly dramatic. "Don't use that language with me. Rick's right. You need to grow up and be a man. We've carried you long enough." Carried me? I'd been working since I was 15, paying for my own clothes and phone. I'd even provided them $300 per month in rent for the last year, as Rick asked, to teach me responsibility. That was more than $3,600 taken from me to live in a house where I had grown up my entire life. "It's my birthday today," I muttered, my voice barely audible. "I know. Consider this your chance to finally become independent. Happy birthday." Then she hung up. I stood there in disbelief, staring at my duffel bag, which evidently contained all of my stuff that Rick had determined I could keep. I opened it right there on the driveway, and inside were some clothing, albeit not all of mine. My laptop, luckily, some basic toiletries, and a few strange books. There are no photographs of Dad, none of my gaming accessories, none of my tools from the workshop. "You've got 10 minutes to get anything else you absolutely need," Rick remarked, inspecting his counterfeit Rolex. "Then I'm changing the locks." I felt numb as I walked into my childhood house. Tessa was sitting on the stairs, still recording me, with that dumb sneer on her face. "Aw, is little Kevin going to cry?" she teased. I ignored her and walked directly to my room. I reached up into the crawl area for my ammo box of savings, as well as my backup hard drive containing all of my essential information, and a photo book of Dad and me. Then I remembered my father's watch, the one decent thing he owned. A vintage Seiko that his father had given him. It was in my desk drawer. But it wasn't. "Looking for this?" Tessa stood in my doorway, dangling Dad's watch. "Rick pawned it last week, said since you were leaving anyway, you wouldn't need it." Something in me broke at that point. I sprang at her, not intending to hurt her, only to get the watch, but she jumped back laughing. "I'm kidding. God, you're so easy to mess with. Rick sold it months ago." I can't recall much after that. I somehow made it back outdoors with my few belongings. Mrs. Alvarez watched from her porch, her expression filled with concern. I must have looked like a total mess. "Kevin?" she shouted out. "Is everything okay, mijo?" I couldn't even respond to her. I simply shook my head and began walking, with no goal in mind. My hands were so shaky that I couldn't even text Adam to ask if I could crash at his apartment that night. I slept on Adam's couch trying to make sense of how my life had disintegrated in a matter of hours. Adam's family graciously allowed me to stay the first night, although their apartment was small, with just 2 bedrooms for Adam, his parents, and his younger sister. His mother set up the couch for me with clean sheets and even gave me a new toothbrush. But I knew this wasn't a long-term fix. I went to school the next morning in the identical clothing I had worn the day before. I tried to act normal, but I was a complete wreck on the inside. During lunch I sat with my pals and eventually broke down, telling them everything. "Dude, that's messed up," Noah said. "They can't just throw you out like that." "Actually, they legally can," Luke added. Luke's father was a paralegal, so he had some legal knowledge. "Not helping, Ty," Adam replied, giving him a glare. "Sorry, just saying," Luke murmured. After school I went to work at the computer shop. Mr. Singh looked at me and knew something was amiss. "What happened?" he questioned with his strong Indian accent. "You look like hell warmed over." I gave him the shortened version. He listened without interrupting and then disappeared into his office. He returned with a protein snack and a can of Coke. "Eat," he replied. Then we spoke. After my shift, Mr. Singh offered to let me remain in the shop's storage room temporarily. "There's a cot in there from when my nephew worked here," he told me. "Not comfortable, but better than the street." I was so grateful that I almost sobbed again. But when I was trying to thank him, I remembered something or someone I hadn't considered before. My father's brother, Uncle Thomas. We weren't really close. He lived approximately 40 miles away in Tempe, and worked insane hours as a construction supervisor. But he was always nice to me, sending me birthday cards with $50 and occasionally checking in. I hadn't seen him for almost a year. Rick was always making excuses when Uncle Thomas came to visit, most likely because he knew Uncle Thomas could see straight through him. I thanked Mr. Singh but said I wanted to try one more thing before accepting his offer. I visited McDonald's to use their free Wi-Fi. My phone plan had limited data, so I called Uncle Thomas. I half anticipated to receive voicemail, given that it was around 6 p.m. and he was most likely still on the job site. Instead, he focused on the second ring. "Kevin? Is everything okay?" He could undoubtedly tell there was something wrong by the tone of my voice. I attempted to sound casual but broke down around 10 seconds in. I informed him about being kicked out, my mother's reaction, and Dad's watch being sold. There was a moment of stillness. He continued. "Text me your location. I'm coming to get you right now." An hour later, his dusty F-150 arrived outside McDonald's. When he saw me with my duffel bag, his cheeks became an unusual shade of red. "Get in," he said. "But first, I'm making a call." I hopped into his truck and saw him call my mother on speakerphone. "Sandra, it's Thomas. I've got Kevin with me. He tells me Rick kicked him out yesterday, and you went along with it. What the hell is going on?" My mother's voice came over as guarded and furious. "This is between me, Rick and Kevin. It's not your business, Thomas." Uncle Thomas laughed, but it wasn't funny. "Not my business? My brother's son is homeless on his 18th birthday, and it's not my business? Let me tell you something, Sandra. You're going to regret this. Mark my words." "Is that a threat?" she demanded. "No, it's a promise," he said. Calmly. "You and that leech you married have no idea what's coming. I hope that house is worth losing your son over." He hung up and turned to me. "Kevin, there's some stuff you need to know about that house, but first, let's get you settled at my place." Uncle Thomas's house was a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home that he had mostly restored himself. He lived there with his wife Rachel, a nurse, and his 14-year-old son Mason, who was infatuated with basketball. They instantly emptied up their home office for me and treated me as if I were family rather than a burden. That night, after dinner, real home-cooked food, not the takeout my mom and Rick often ordered, Uncle Thomas sat me down with a Coke. I'd never seen him seem this serious. "Kevin, did you know your grandfather owned that house free and clear, and that when he died, he left it specifically to you?" I almost choked on my soda. "What are you talking about? That house is Mom's, isn't it?" Uncle Tom shook his head. "Your grandfather and your dad's father bought that house back in the 1990s for about $120,000. When he got sick, he updated his will. He left cash to your dad and me, but the house was specifically left to you, his only grandchild." He stood up and went to his desk, taking out a folder containing yellowed papers. "Here's a copy of the will. I kept one because I never fully trusted your mom. Especially after she rushed to marry that con artist Rick." As I read through the legal wording, my palms shook again. But for a different reason. There it was in black and white. My primary residence at 1422 Oakwood Drive will be left to my grandson, Kevin Allen Mitchell. "But how?" I stammered. "How could they live there if it's mine?" "You were 11 years old when Grandpa died," Uncle Thomas explained. "Too young to own property. The will specified that your parents would act as trustees until you turned 18. When your dad died a year later, your mom became the sole trustee, She was supposed to transfer everything to you on your 18th birthday. My mind was whirling. Instead, they kicked me out of my own house. Uncle Thomas nodded grimly. That's not all. I bet they've been renting out the basement apartment for cash and pocketing the money that was supposed to go into a trust for you. He was correct. About 2 years after Rick moved in, they converted the basement into a separate apartment and rented it out to a college student named Jake for $900 per month. I always assumed it was their house and money. So, what do we do? I inquired, rage replacing shock. First, we document everything, Uncle Thomas stated. Then we talk to my friend Leo. He's the best real estate attorney in the state. Just then, Aunt Rachel entered with a small chocolate cake and a solitary candle. I know it's a day late, but everyone deserves a birthday cake, she added cheerfully. It was a simple thing, yet I had to hold back tears. My mother couldn't be bothered to remember my birthday, but my aunt made me feel important. As I blew out the flame, Mason inquired, "Did you make a wish?" I nodded. "Yeah, I did." "Don't tell us what it was," Aunt Rachel urged. "Or it won't come true." But internally, I understood exactly what I had prayed for. Justice. That night, in the converted office, with new linens on a pull-out couch, I finally broke down. All of the emotions I had been suppressing, including shock, betrayal, wrath, and fear, came spilling out. I buried my face in the pillow so no one could hear me sobbing like a small child. I sobbed for the house I'd lost, for my father who wasn't there to defend me, for years of putting up with Rick and Tessa's nonsense, and for my mother's decision to prioritize them above me. I cried till I was exhausted and then fell asleep. The following morning, I awoke to the fragrance of pancakes and the sound of Mason shooting hoops in the driveway. For a minute, I forgot what had happened. Then everything came rushing back. But something was different. The anguish of yesterday has been replaced by something more powerful. Determination. I wasn't going to just get through this. I was prepared to fight back. Uncle Thomas explained the strategy over breakfast. "I called Leo last night after you went to bed. He can see us at 11 o'clock. In the meantime, I want you to write down everything you can remember about the basement apartment when they renovated it. How much they've been charging for rent, everything." "I can do better than that," I responded, taking out my phone. "I've got texts from Rick about the rent payments." Uncle Thomas grinned. "That's my nephew, always thinking ahead." Leo Goldstein, Uncle Thomas's attorney acquaintance, operated from a restored Victorian mansion downtown. His office was on the second story, with dark wood paneling and books all over. He looked younger than I expected, possibly in his mid-40s, with a clean beard and glasses that resembled those of a college professor. He listened intently while I recounted everything, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Uncle Thomas provided some information on my grandfather and the will. When we were finished, Leo leaned back in his chair and tapped his pen on the pad. "Based on these documents," he informed me, "the house is unquestionably yours, Kevin. Your mother had a fiduciary duty to transfer the property to you when you turned 18. Not only did she fail to do that, but she and her husband illegally evicted you from your own property." "So I can just go back and kick them out?" I was wondering. Leo smiled, but it was not a joyful one. "We could do that, or we could build a stronger case and really make them pay for what they've done." He stated that if we could prove they had been collecting rental income from the property without putting it in trust for me, we could sue for both misuse of funds and wrongful eviction of a minor. Because I was kicked out at 6:30 p.m. on my birthday, when I was technically still 17 years old according to my birth certificate, which said I was born at 9:17 p.m., they faced extra legal issues. "Here's what we're going to do," Leo explained, leaning forward. "First, we need to establish a paper trail. Kevin, you mentioned texts about the rental income?" I browsed through my phone and discovered several texts from Rick throughout the last year. "Remind Jake that rent is due tomorrow. $900 in cash only. Jake is late again with the rent. Tell him to pay up or find another spot." I received the $900 from Jake. I am going to utilize it to pay for the yacht. Leo raised his brow at the final one. "Rick has a boat?" "A small pontoon boat he bought last summer," I explained. "Said it was an investment opportunity for lake tours or something. He used it like twice, then kept it parked in our driveway." "Perfect," Leo remarked, taking additional notes. "Now we need to get statements from witnesses. Your friend Adam, who took you in that first night. The tenant Jake. Maybe some neighbors who saw you being kicked out." "Mrs. Alvarez was outside when it happened," I recalled. "And I think she called my mom about it." "Excellent. Here's my plan. I'll file an emergency petition with the court to establish your ownership rights and get a temporary restraining order against your mother and Rick to prevent them from selling or further encumbering the property. Then we'll build our case for financial restitution. Over the next 2 weeks, we collected evidence and statements. Adam and his parents made sworn statements about how I walked up at their door with only a duffel bag. Luke's father assisted us with part of the paperwork because he was familiar with the judicial system. We even reached out to Jake, the downstairs resident. He was a 22-year-old community college student who was completely unaware of the ownership status. He was horrified to learn what had happened. "Dude, that's so messed up," he informed me when we met at a Starbucks near school. "I had no clue it was your house. Rick always acted like he was doing me a favor by renting to me." Jake sent us copies of all of his rental agreements and payment records, which totaled $900 every month for over 3 years. Over $32,000 should have gone to me. He also informed us that Rick had suddenly wanted cash exclusively for payments, which Leo considered a major red flag. "He's trying to hide the income," Leo explained. "This just gets better and better for our case." Mrs. Alvarez, our elderly neighbor, was probably the most crucial witness. She had observed everything from her front porch and even photographed it with her phone because she believed something wasn't right. "I saw that awful man throw your bag out," she told me, her accent thick but her memory sharp. "I wanted to help, but I didn't know what to do. I called your mother but she never called back. I've been worried sick about you, mijo." The photo she had taken plainly showed Rick standing over me, my duffel bag on the ground, and a timestamp of 6:30 p.m. on October 22, proving that I was still legally a child when they booted me out. Leo also requested a title search for the residence, which revealed something startling. Rick took out a $60,000 home equity line of credit barely 6 months after marrying my mother. They had no legal right to do this, because the house was not theirs to borrow against. "This is fraud," Leo stated plainly as he showed us the documentation. "They forged documents to secure that loan. The bank should have caught this. But they probably just saw that your mom was living there and assumed she owned it." By mid-November, we were prepared. Leo filed files with the court and issued official notices to my mother and Rick. The judge assigned to our case, Judge Bennett, granted an emergency hearing based on proof of a minor's wrongful removal. "Now we wait," Leo explained. But not for long. 3 days after the legal warnings arrived, my phone flooded with texts and phone calls from my mother. I disregarded them all, per Leo's instructions. Then Rick made threats. "You ungrateful little... after all we've done for you." I blocked his phone number. Tessa, my stepsister, also got in on the act, writing on Instagram about how I was attempting to take their house and how psychotic I was. My real friends knew better and supported me, but it still stung to see the lies. A week later, we had our first court date. I wore a suit that Uncle Thomas helped me buy, but my mother arrived in an exquisite outfit that I knew she couldn't afford. Rick sported a phony Rolex and a smug grin that faded when our lawyer presented the evidence. "Your Honor," Leo responded. "Not only did the defendants fail to transfer the property as required by the will, they illegally evicted the rightful owner who was still a minor at the time of eviction and have been collecting rental income without accounting for those funds." My mother's counsel, a nervous-looking man who kept dropping his papers, attempted to explain that they had utilized the rental revenue for my benefit to cover food, clothing, and other costs. Leo was prepared for this. "We have receipts showing that Kevin purchased his own clothes, paid for his own phone, and even paid $300 monthly rent to the defendants, essentially paying them to live in a house he already owned." The judge's countenance darkened with each piece of evidence. By the end of the session, she had given a temporary order. My mom and Rick were unable to collect any additional rent from Jake, make any improvements to the property, and were had to furnish complete financial records within 30 days. Outside the courts, my mother attempted to approach me. "Kevin, please. You have to understand we were just trying to prepare you for the real world." I stared her directly in the eyes. "The real world? In the real world, people who steal and lie go to jail. Consider this your preparation." Rick approached me, fists clenched, but Uncle Thomas stepped in between us. "Not a smart move," he said. Rick quickly backed down. Uncle Thomas weighed 50 pounds and had 4 inches of muscle. As they went away, I felt both sad and satisfied. This was only the beginning. Over the next month, more unpleasant revelations emerged. The financial discovery process revealed that my mother and Rick had not only taken up a $60,000 home equity line of credit, but also maxed it out. Rick had spent the money on failed business projects, vacations to Cancun, and BMW payments. Leo was really enraged. "This is textbook fraud," I heard him say. They forged documents to secure that loan. We're adding this to our complaint. Meanwhile, I continued to focus on school and my job at the computer repair company, which had offered me more hours. Uncle Thomas and Aunt Rachel requested that I stay with them rent-free until everything was settled. Family doesn't charge family, Uncle Thomas simply stated when I offered to pay something. Mason was actually rather relaxed about his cousin suddenly staying with them. He even cleared out half of his wardrobe to make room for my things and encouraged me to join his pals for weekend basketball games. It wasn't the life I had envisioned, but it was better than I had anticipated. The case moved very rapidly when the loan fraud was exposed. We had another hearing in early December, during which the judge appointed a receiver to manage the property and funds until a final decision was reached. That's when everything went horribly wrong. The receiver learned Rick had taken out a second mortgage for $25,000 barely a week after they kicked me out. That money had already gone, largely to online gambling sites. Rick lost it in court when this came up, yelling about his rights and calling me every term in the book. The judge ordered him removed and detained in contempt. As Christmas neared, I received an unexpected guest at Uncle Thomas's house. Jake, the basement tenant, who appeared nervous. "Your mom and Rick told me I have to pay them in cash from now on," he recalled. "They said if I told anyone, they'd evict me immediately." We quickly communicated this to Leo and the receiver. The judge issued a restraining order, preventing my mother and Rick from even approaching the property without court authorization. By this point, word of our case had gone across the neighborhood and my former high school. People I barely knew messaged me with stories about Rick's frauds and my mother's falsehoods. Former acquaintances of my mother came forward with texts in which she boasted about living the good life with Kevin's inheritance. One of my father's former co-workers even contacted me to inform me that Rick attempted to sell him investment opportunities, using my father's name as a reference shortly after his death. The guy had seen through it and cut contact. But he thought I should know. It was like seeing a house of cards fall in slow motion. Christmas with Uncle Thomas's family was not like the stressful, materialistic holidays with Mom and Rick. We bought a real tree, made homemade ornaments with Mason, and exchanged simple but heartfelt gifts. Aunt Rachel made homemade tamales using her grandmother's recipe, and Uncle Thomas went us to volunteer at a local shelter on Christmas Eve. For New Year's, my friends came over for a gaming night. As the clock struck midnight and we all exclaimed, "Happy New Year," I realized I was truly happy. Regardless of what had transpired, I had people who truly cared about me. The final hearing was scheduled for January 15th, almost precisely 3 months after they kicked me out. In the weeks running up to it, my mother undertook a desperate push to persuade me to withdraw the case. She left heartfelt voicemails describing how Rick had manipulated her. She even turned up at my workplace, raising such a commotion that Mr. Singh had to contact security. She attempted to ambush me after class at college, pleading for 5 minutes to explain. Rick took a different strategy. He had his brother, who turned out to be a low-level pot dealer rather than the investment banker Rick had always claimed, approach me outside school with an offer of $10,000 in cash to drop everything. I recorded the exchange and included it in our proof. Tessa continued her social media campaign, publishing manipulated screenshots of conversations and alleging I was plotting to destroy the family out of jealousy. She even launched a GoFundMe page, stating they were going to be destitute because of me, but it only got about $200 from naive individuals. Throughout it all, I remained focused on school and job. My grades improved dramatically now that I was no longer living in a poisonous environment. Mr. Singh offered me a promotion to assistant manager once I completed my associate's degree. I even considered applying to Arizona State's computer science program in the fall. Uncle Thomas met with me the day before the final hearing. "Kevin, I want you to be prepared for tomorrow," stated the teacher. "No matter what the judge decides, you've already won. You stood up for yourself. You discovered the truth, and you've built a new life. I'm proud of you, and your dad would be too." I nodded, my throat thick with emotion. "I know. I just want it to be over." "It will be," he pledged. "One way or another." The next morning as we prepared to go for court, I noticed Aunt Rachel putting together a tiny box. "What's that?" I inquired. She smiled. "Just a little something for after. Win or lose, we're celebrating you today." Uncle Thomas was unusually silent while driving to the courthouse. Finally he said, "Whatever happens in there, remember that you have a home with us for as long as you need it. No rush, no pressure. Your family." I nodded, too nervous to say. But inside I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years, the comfort of knowing I genuinely belonged somewhere. The courtroom was busier than I expected. Mr. Singh, Mrs. Alvarez, Jake, Adam, Noah, and Luke were all present. My mother, Rick, and Tessa sat in the front row, dressed appropriately for church. Judge Bennett brought the court to order. She was a stern-faced woman in her 60s, reading spectacles perched on the tip of her nose. She started by summarizing the case. This court has reviewed extensive evidence regarding the ownership of the property at 1422 Oakwood Drive, the actions of the trustees, Sandra and Gregory Lawson, and the circumstances surrounding the eviction of Kevin Mitchell on October 22 of last year. She paused, looking directly at my mother and Rick through her glasses. The evidence of financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty in this case is some of the most egregious this court has seen. Not only did the trustees fail to transfer the property as required by the will of Harold Mitchell, but they actively worked to conceal the rightful ownership from the beneficiary, misappropriated rental income, fraudulently encumbered the property, and then evicted the rightful owner, while he was still a legal minor. My mother was already weeping. Rick sat stone-faced. Tessa was furiously texting, most likely updating her fans. Therefore, this court rules as follows, Judge Bennett went on. Full and clear title to the property at 1422 Oakwood Drive is hereby transferred to Kevin Allen Mitchell, effective immediately. All liens and encumbrances placed on the property by the defendants are deemed fraudulent and void. Uncle Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder and gave me a comforting squeeze. Furthermore, the judge said, the defendants, Sandra and Gregory Lawson, are ordered to pay restitution to Kevin Mitchell in the amount of $57,400, representing the misappropriated rental income and illegal rent payments collected from the plaintiff. She was not done. The court additionally imposes $25,000 in punitive penalties for illegally evicting a youngster. Finally, this court has referred the evidence of loan fraud to the district attorney's office for possible criminal prosecution. The gavel crashed down with a thud that echoed throughout the courtroom. Outside the courthouse, my mother burst into tears and rushed toward me. Kevin, please, we have nowhere to go. I'm still your mother. I paused and looked at her for a moment. I nearly felt bad for her. Almost. You stopped being my mother the moment you chose him over me, I replied softly. You threw me out of my house on my birthday without a second thought. Now you know how it feels. Rick attempted to be tough one final time. You think you've won? This isn't over, you little. Leo cut him off. Actually, it is over. And every word out of your mouth just increases the likelihood of criminal charges. I suggest you stop talking. 3 days later, I stood on my front lawn, watching sheriff's deputies monitor my mother and Rick as they loaded their stuff into a U-Haul truck. Tessa was crying profusely while filming herself on social media about being homeless. She was moving in with her real mother, who owned a wonderful condo downtown. My mother made one final plea as she carried out her last box. Kevin, you can't do this to your own mother. Where are we supposed to go? I stared at her gently. You should have thought about that before you kicked out your son. I was wondering the same thing 3 months ago. As they drove away, Uncle Thomas placed his hand on my shoulder. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. For the first time in a long time, I actually am. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom at home. I decided to continue renting the basement to Jake at a reasonable rate. I used some of the damage money to complete the home renovations that Rick had been putting off for years. I also established a minor scholarship at my former high school in my grandfather's name. It wasn't much, $1,000 per year, but it would help someone in need. Last I heard, my mother and Rick were living in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of town. Rick is facing charges for loan fraud, and my mother's dental office dismissed her after learning about the matter. Sometimes I feel a tinge of guilt, but then I remember standing on that driveway with nothing but a duffel bag for my birthday. My mother's harsh voice said, "You need to grow up," before hanging up on me. And I recall that they did this to themselves. The house is mine. It always was. My life is now totally complete. So, was I an asshole for reclaiming what was legally mine while leaving my mother and stepfather with nothing? I honestly don't care either way. Some things have to be taught the hard way. A lot of individuals are curious about my future plans. I plan to finish my degree, continue working part-time, and eventually sell the house to buy something with fewer terrible memories. But now it feels lovely to sleep under my own roof. Nobody can steal it from me.